They threatened $500 a day fines. Then the state found their secret well. I never thought turning on my heated walkway would spark a war. But when the HOA tried to find me during a deadly storm, I knew something was off. And digging for answers led me straight to a secret illegal well they'd hidden under my land for decades. Stick with me. This one moves fast, and every twist is wilder than the last. If you like stories where ordinary folks stand their ground and win, hit subscribe and ride with me on the next one. The blizzard had hammered the foothills all night. But by sunrise, the only part of my ranch that wasn't buried in ice was the walkway running from my porch to the front gate. The heating elements hummed steadily beneath the concrete, melting snow as fast as it fell. I designed the system last fall: simple sensors, redundant breakers, an insulated feed line running from my shed. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. And on mornings like this, it kept Mrs. Halverson from snapping a hip on her way to check the mail. That was all the justification I needed. I sipped coffee on the porch, watching the steam trail upward until the wind tore it apart. The storm hadn't broken yet. The sky was a flat sheet of white pressing into the ridgeline, and the evergreens bowed under the weight. My cattle wouldn't wander far in weather like this, and nothing on the property demanded immediate attention. For once, the ranch was holding steady through winter's worst. Then I saw movement, a figure trudging up the county road, head bowed against the wind. Even from a distance, I recognized the stiff shoulders, the clipboard clutched to her chest, the bright red coat that looked more decorative than functional. Bethany Crowell, HOA president, a woman who believed laminated rules outranked common sense. The gate was open because the snowplow hadn't come through yet. She marched straight onto my driveway, boots sliding on untreated ice. 2 slips, one near fall, but she caught herself both times with a ferocity that suggested she'd blame the ice itself if she hit the ground. She stepped onto the heated walkway, froze mid-stride, and looked down at the exposed concrete like it had personally offended her. I stayed where I was on the porch. No reason to shout over the wind. "Mr. Carter!" Her voice cut through the storm like a rusty saw blade. "We need to address a serious violation immediately." I took another sip of coffee. "Morning, Bethany. Careful, you're going to break something walking on untreated ice." She ignored the comment, flipping up the first page on her clipboard. The top sheet was a fine print form with several lines highlighted in neon yellow. She jabbed one with a gloved finger. "You are in violation of Section 14C of the Silver Ridge Architectural Standards. Unauthorized exterior heating systems are strictly prohibited without formal approval." I raised an eyebrow. "Approval from who?" "The HOA, obviously." She said it like I had asked why water was wet. I kept my tone steady. "Bethany, you know my land isn't part of Silver Ridge. The ranch predates the HOA. The nearest property line your board controls is half a mile downhill. The visual impact extends into the community," she snapped back. "This walkway is visible from common areas. Therefore, it falls under extended compliance jurisdiction." I had never heard that phrase in my life. "Extended compliance," I repeated. She nodded, pleased to lecture. "Policies that apply beyond strict boundary limits when aesthetic integrity is threatened. And this," she swept her hand toward the heated path, "is an unapproved modification. You're required to shut it off immediately." I stepped off the porch. The wind shoved cold needles against my face, but I walked toward her anyway. She stiffened when I got close enough to speak without shouting. "It's 12 degrees below zero with the wind chill," I said quietly. "The walkway prevents injuries. The county encourages heated paths for elderly residents. Mrs. Halverson uses this route twice a day." Bethany's lips thinned. "Safety concerns don't override community standards." "On my land, they do," I said. She ripped a form from her clipboard and shoved it toward me. "This is your formal violation notice. Failure to comply within 24 hours will result in daily fines of $500. Refusal to resolve the issue may lead to a lien. I didn't take the paper. The wind plastered it against her coat anyway. "You're serious," I said. "You came through a blizzard to tell me to shut down a safety system." "This is not optional, Mr. Carter." I watched her turn and march back down the driveway, nearly losing her footing again. My walkway kept melting snow, her boots kept skidding, but somehow I was the one causing a problem. When she reached the road, she paused, looked back, and then disappeared into the curtain of blowing white. I waited until she was gone before picking up the notice she'd dropped. The wording was aggressive, the fines immediate, the authority non-existent. Behind me, my phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Halverson. "Saw someone yelling at you from my window. Everything okay, Jake?" I typed back. "Nothing I can't handle. Stay warm." But the truth settled in my chest like ice. Bethany didn't walk half a mile in a storm for nothing. She wanted this walkway shut down badly, and I couldn't shake the question clawing at the back of my mind. Why was the HOA targeting a safety feature in the middle of a storm? The wind didn't give me an answer. It only sharpened the questions. I went inside, set the violation notice on the kitchen table, and took a picture of it from 3 angles. If Bethany wanted to start a paper trail, I'd make sure it ran both ways. Then I called the only person who'd know exactly how much trouble this could turn into, Sarah Whitfield, my land rights attorney. She picked up on the second ring. "Jake? What's going on? You usually only call this early when something's burning down." "Nothing's on fire," I said, but Bethany tried her best to light a match. I explained the violation, the threat of fines, the sudden appearance of an extended compliance policy. I heard Sarah's pen scratching across a notepad. "Tell me that's not a real rule," I said. There was a pause, then another. When she spoke, her tone had shifted, measured, cautious. "Jake, I'm looking at the covenants now. There is no extended compliance policy. Never has been." "So she made it up?" "She either made it up," Sarah said, "or someone on that board created a private internal document and never recorded it legally. Either way, it's not enforceable." I stared out the window at the walkway glowing under the falling snow. She threatened a lien. That's the part that worries me. Papers shuffled on her end. An HOA can attempt a lien if they believe they have jurisdiction. Even if they don't, the process is messy. You'd win in court, but they can drag you through hell before you get there. I tightened my grip on the phone. "So what's the play?" "For now, do nothing. Don't shut off the walkway. Don't respond to Bethany. Send me the notice you photographed." Her voice dipped lower. "And Jake, document every word she says. People don't fabricate rules unless they're trying to cover something." Before I could ask what she meant, another sound cut through 3 vibration pings. I checked my screen. An HOA community-wide email. The subject line was ridiculous. "Urgent. Homeowner violates community safety standards." Sarah sighed. "Read it to me." "It says I'm endangering neighborhood uniformity," I said, scrolling. "Refusing lawful compliance and posing risk to property values." She's offering neighbors a hotline to report further violations. "She's smearing you to build momentum for enforcement," Sarah said. "She wants people to believe you're a delinquent before the facts come out." Another ping. Another message, this one from a neighbor I barely knew. "Why are you ignoring the HOA? People are talking. Just shut off the walkway." I exhaled sharply. "It's starting already." Sarah's tone hardened. "You need to understand something. When an HOA attacks this fast, this publicly, it's not about a walkway. It means they're desperate to shut you down before you ask the wrong question." "What question?" "That's what we need to find out." Before we ended the call, she added, Don't confront her yet. Let her dig deeper. People who fabricate rules always do. I hung up, but the sense of pressure didn't lift. If anything, it thickened. Something was way off, and the walkway was just the excuse. I mulled over my next steps while the windows rattled in the storm. My mind kept circling the same fact. The HOA shouldn't care about anything outside their boundary. Not unless I had something they wanted, or something they feared. At noon, another knock rattled the front door. Not Bethany. Patricia, the HOA treasurer, stood on my porch, coat covered in snow. She looked uncomfortable, not just because of the cold. "Jake," she said, forcing a polite smile, "we wanted to give you a chance to resolve your violation quietly before further action is taken." "We?" I asked. "The board," she replied, glancing back at the road. "Bethany said you were uncooperative." I stepped aside so she could see the walkway running clear and safe. "Explain to me how a heated path on my land violates anything." She stiffened. "It affects community cohesion." "That's not a rule," I said. "That's a feeling." Her jaw tightened. "Jake, just comply. It's easier for everyone." "And if I don't?" She hesitated, eyes flicking toward the direction she'd come from. "Bethany is prepared to initiate legal action. She's convinced she has grounds." "Does she?" Patricia didn't answer. She only said, "She's determined." That told me everything. Determination without authority means one thing: a cover-up. "I appreciate you coming by," I said finally, "but the walkway stays on." She drew a shaky breath. "Then I can't help what happens next." As she left, my phone buzzed again, this time Sarah calling back. "I checked something," she said immediately. "Jake, there's a new document uploaded to the HOA member portal today. It's titled Extended Compliance Policy 2020 Revision." "So she created it this morning?" "She created it," Sarah said, pauses stretching between her words, "and backdated it 3 years." My chest tightened. "She's falsifying official records." "She is," Sarah confirmed, "and rushing to enforce them before anyone notices." I stared at the walkway, snow sizzling as it hit the warm concrete. "What's she trying to hide, Sarah?" "I don't know yet," she said. "But people don't forge policy unless the truth is worse." A gust of wind slammed into the house, rattling the metal gutter like a warning. Sarah spoke again, voice low. "Jake, something bigger is coming. Be ready." I ended the call and looked out at the storm, the walkway glowing like a line drawn in defiance. The HOA wasn't just overreaching, they were scrambling, covering tracks, manufacturing rules. Whatever this was, it wasn't about snow. It wasn't about heat. It wasn't about aesthetics. It was about something buried deeper. And I planned to dig until I found it. By late afternoon, the blizzard had thickened again fat, wind-driven flakes smearing the world into a blur of white and shadow. I was tightening a loose bracket in the walkway's breaker box when the ranch dogs started barking toward the road. Not their usual alert bark, this had edge, agitation. I stepped out from under the shed awning just as 3 figures appeared at the gate. Bethany, Patricia, and Gary, trudging through knee-high drifts like they were advancing on an enemy fort. The storm clawed at them, but they pushed forward anyway. That alone told me they weren't here to talk. They stopped at the top of the walkway, on the melted strip of exposed concrete. Their boots steamed where snow hissed beneath them. Bethany's coat was plastered with ice, hair stuck to her hood, but her eyes, those were sharp as broken glass. "Mr. Carter," she called, voice brittle. "You've ignored your violation notice. That was unwise." I walked toward them slowly, staying centered on the walkway. I wasn't about to stand in a snowbank and give her the psychological high ground. "You came out here in this storm again?" "I'm flattered." No reaction. She held out a fresh set of papers sealed in a plastic sleeve. This is your second and final warning. The board has unanimously agreed to move forward with penalties unless this walkway is shut down tonight. Fines based on a rule that doesn't exist, I said. Gary stepped forward. He was a large man with the kind of red face that always looked one insult away from exploding. The rule is real enough, he said. Shows in the policy archive. That's all that matters. That archive was updated this morning, I said. Pretending something is old doesn't make it old. Patricia avoided my eyes. She was clutching her coat like her ribs were fragile beneath it. If she disagreed with Bethany, she wasn't brave enough to show it. Bethany took another step, lowering her voice. Listen carefully, Jake. You are undermining the order of this community. Your walkway draws attention. It disrupts uniformity. If one resident ignores standards, others will follow. There is no standard, I said. Not for me. My ranch is outside your jurisdiction and always has been. Her jaw tightened. Your property affects the view from our common areas. That places you within extended compliance. Extended compliance isn't real. It is now, she said. There it was, the quiet admission embedded inside arrogance. They needed this to be real, badly. I crossed my arms. What's actually going on here, Bethany? Nobody walks a mile through a blizzard twice in one day to complain about melted snow. Her eyes flickered just for a second. Fear? Panic? A warning to stay in my lane? Then she recovered. This is your last chance to comply. Turn it off. No. Gary jabbed a finger toward me. You think you're clever, but you're not special. You don't get to ignore the rules just because you're sitting on a few extra acres. I let the insult slide. He wanted a reaction. What exactly do you plan to enforce this with? A fake policy and cold toes? Bethany inhaled sharply. We'll file the lien tomorrow morning. Without jurisdiction. With confidence. I studied them three board members soaked by snow, teeth chattering, hands shaking, yet still standing out here like this was life or death. And suddenly it clicked. Their desperation wasn't about the walkway. It was about control or losing it. When people cling this tightly to authority, it's because they're terrified of scrutiny. Sarah's warning echoed in my mind. People don't forge policy unless the truth is worse. What are you hiding? I asked quietly. Bethany's expression fractured for the briefest moment. A crack. A tell. You're delusional, she snapped. Nothing is hidden. She turned on her heel. Come on. We're done trying to reason with him. They started back down the driveway, but I called after them. I'm not shutting anything down, and the more you push, the more I'll dig. Bethany didn't turn around. She just raised her voice above the wind. Then you'd better be prepared for what comes next. Their silhouettes vanished into the storm. The ranch fell quiet again. But the silence wasn't peaceful, more like the taut stillness before a structure gives way. This wasn't going to stop. They were going to escalate until something broke. My phone vibrated. Another email alert. HOA notice. Emergency board session. Discuss sanctions against non-compliant resident. So that was their next step, formal escalation. I stepped back into the shed, shut the door against the wind, and leaned over the breaker panel. The walkway lights glowed steady. They weren't flickering or failing. They were firm, dependable, more dependable than the humans trying to dismantle them. Pressure mounted like snowfall on a weak roof. HOA smearing me publicly, a forged policy, threats of a lien, a sudden board-wide obsession with a walkway they couldn't even regulate. Every piece pointed in one direction. They needed me silent. But I didn't intend to be. I grabbed my phone and called Sarah again. She answered immediately. I figured you'd be calling, she said. I just had visitors, I said. All 3 board members. They threatened to file the lien tomorrow. That fast? She muttered. They're making mistakes. They're panicking, I said, and I want to know why. You will, she said. Because this kind of aggression always leaves a trail. What do I do until then? Document. Record everything. And Jake, don't provoke them. Let them stack their own violations. They don't realize how exposed they are. I exhaled, tension tightening my shoulders. They're moving fast. And we'll move smarter, she said. Trust me. When the call ended, I returned to the walkway, letting the warm strip of cleared concrete guide my next thought. If the HOA wanted a fight, they were going to get one. But I wouldn't fight with noise or bluster. I'd fight with evidence. And sooner or later, evidence always found the cracks. Behind me, the storm rumbled like distant machinery. Somewhere beneath the snow, something more dangerous than a forged policy was waiting. I just had to find it. It started with a flicker barely noticeable, but enough to catch my attention. A brief pulse in the walkway's breaker panel when the heating coils cycled. It shouldn't have been there. The load draw was stable, the system isolated. The flicker meant something external was tugging at the line. I grabbed a flashlight and crossed the yard to the equipment shed. The wind pushed hard, but I forced my way through. Inside, the air was cold, metallic. Tools hung on hooks, the familiar smell of oil and dust settling around me. I traced the conduit along the wall until it dipped into an old hatch near the floor, one I hadn't opened in years. A memory flashed. The previous owner, an aging rancher with more stories than teeth, once mentioned old utilities from before the annex. I didn't think much of it then. I did now. I knelt, brushed aside the grit, and pulled the hatch handle. It groaned like it hadn't been touched since the Carter administration. A cold draft wafted up from below, earthy, stale. I lowered myself inside. The access tunnel was cramped, maybe 4 feet high, and lined with old timber beams. My flashlight beam caught something on the far wall, a rusted metal junction box the size of a large cooler, with pipes branching in all directions like arteries. A faded stencil on the front read, Silver Ridge Water Distribution, 1974. My heartbeat thumped once, hard. The HOA was founded in 1998. Why was a decades-old water distribution line sitting under my barn? I stepped closer, brushing dirt away from the pipes. They weren't abandoned. They were active. Condensation clung to the valve's warm water moving through cold metal. I put a hand on one pipe. It vibrated. Someone was still using this system. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the storm outside. I snapped photos, then pried open the junction box. Inside, the valves were tagged with color-coded markers, house numbers from the Silver Ridge subdivision. One pipe, thicker than the rest, had a handwritten label. Feed Line A, primary. The HOA wasn't just overstepping onto my property. They were running an active water system through it, and not a legal one. I backed out of the hatch, snow scattering off my boots as I stood upright. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from clarity. This was why they fabricated a rule, why they threatened a lien, why they showed up in a blizzard. The walkway wasn't the problem. My land was the threat, because somewhere under it, they had something to hide. My phone buzzed. Sarah. Tell me you're sitting down, I said as soon as I answered. That's not the tone I like to hear. What did you find? I explained everything. The pipes, the junction box, the labels. The silence on her end grew longer with each detail. Jake, she finally said, private water systems serving multiple residences require extensive state permitting, annual inspections, certified operators, emergency bypass valves. If this is still active and not on record, it's illegal, I said. Not just illegal, dangerous. If contamination enters that line, dozens of homes could be affected. You said it's under your barn? Yes. That means the HOA not only built on or near your property, they may be trespassing underground without easements. A legal thought slammed into place. Sarah, if they buried lines under my land without permission, that's a major violation, she finished. And if they know the system is illegal, their panic makes sense. I crouched beside the open hatch, staring at the dark hole like it was staring back. They came after the walkway because they needed a reason to pressure me, distract me, keep me from noticing this. Exactly, Sarah said. You finding this threatens everything they've built. Another vibration, an incoming call. Not from Sarah this time, from an unknown number. I let it ring out. Sarah continued. Listen carefully. Do not confront them. Do not mention the pipes. Not yet. We need proof records, photos, anything showing they're using this system. If they realize you've found it, they might try to destroy evidence. I have photos already. Good. Get more. And Jake, this could be big. Much bigger than a walkway. After the call, I went back into the crawl space. I followed one of the pipes as it snaked deeper underground until the tunnel narrowed. The faint hum beneath my palm grew stronger. This wasn't a backup line or an abandoned system. It was live, feeding water to every home in Silver Ridge. And if what Sarah said was true, they were doing it without state oversight. I took more photos, valve serial numbers, labeling, corrosion patterns, evidence, cold, undeniable evidence. As I backed out, I noticed something I missed the first time. A small, torn piece of laminate tucked behind the junction box. I pried it free. It was part of a maintenance log sheet, the kind HOAs submit to prove compliance, except the date was smudged, the signature line blank, and the fade pattern suggested it had been printed within the last year but made to look decades old. A forged policy was bad, but a forged maintenance record for an illegal water system was catastrophic. The implications hit fast. If I reported this, the HOA wouldn't just owe fines. They could face criminal charges. The entire subdivision could lose water, and Bethany's reign of control would crumble overnight. I climbed out of the hatch, shut the panel, and locked it. This time the storm outside felt quieter, like the ranch itself was holding its breath. I headed back toward the house, snow crunching under my boots, my mind racing. Bethany wanted control, but she'd built her empire on an unstable foundation, and I had just found the fault line running straight through it. This wasn't about the walkway anymore. It was about a system buried under my feet, one mistake away from collapse. The next move wouldn't be theirs, it would be mine, and the storm outside was nothing compared to the one that was coming for the HOA. I spread the photos across my kitchen table pipes, valves, labels, the old junction box stamped with a date that predated the HOA by 2 decades. Evidence, cold and ugly. Evidence they would deny until the last breath of their authority. Evidence that once it reached the right hands, would tear the board's fabricated rules apart. I emailed everything to Sarah with a short note. Confirm legality. Need next steps ASAP. It didn't take long. She called back almost immediately. Jake, I finished my preliminary checks, she said. That water system qualifies as a Class 2 public supply line. Completely illegal without permits. Completely uninsured. Completely unmonitored. So it's worse than we thought. Much worse. If that system ever had contamination, and unregulated systems usually do, the HOA could be held liable for endangerment. Criminal charges are on the table. I exhaled slowly. What's the play? We need to involve the state, she said. Quietly. You can't confront them directly, or they'll tear up records, destroy evidence, maybe even shut off the line themselves. And if they do that? They show consciousness of guilt. I sat down, leaning my weight on the table. The storm outside pressed against the windows like it wanted to listen in. Sarah continued. This isn't like a zoning violation or an overgrown lawn complaint. This is public health. If you file a formal complaint with the Colorado Water Quality Division, inspectors will be obligated to act fast. I looked at the photos again. The rust along the primary feed line wasn't just old. It was active corrosion evidence of water flow where none should exist. What do I risk if I report it? I asked. You risk becoming their #1 target, but you already are. She wasn't wrong. I opened the state website, filled out the online complaint form, uploaded every photo, attached a detailed explanation, and hit submit. No turning back. Less than 2 hours later, my phone rang. A Denver number. This is Inspector Jennifer Garcia with the Colorado Water Quality Division, the woman said. She had a tone I recognized, instantly professional, focused, assessing. Mr. Carter, we reviewed your complaint. Are you telling us there's an active water distribution junction under your property with no state registration? Yes, I said, and I have photographic proof. Can you grant access for inspection? Anytime. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., I'll bring our senior engineer. Direct, immediate. That was the kind of response that told me Sarah was absolutely right. This situation was far from small. I hung up just as another email alert hit my phone. HOA demand letter. Immediate compliance required. Bethany was escalating again because she could feel something slipping, even if she didn't yet know what. The letter threatened emergency legal action, a fast-tracked lien and community-endorsed sanctions. That last part made my jaw clench, not because it meant anything legally, but because it showed how far she was willing to weaponize neighbor pressure. Then came a line that told me she was unraveling. Any resident who endangers community harmony must be treated accordingly. Community harmony. She was building a justification for whatever retaliation she had planned. The ranch dogs barked again, sharp warning barks. I checked the window. A car I didn't recognize idled at the edge of my driveway, headlights cutting through the swirling snow. Someone inside was staring up toward the house. After a moment, the engine revved, tires spun, and the car backed down the hill. They didn't get out, didn't speak, just watched. Bethany was sending people now. Fine, let her escalate. The higher she climbed, the farther she'd fall. The next morning, the blizzard had slowed, enough that the inspectors made it up the mountain road in 2 state-marked vehicles. A county health truck followed. Sheriff Morales arrived too, though I hadn't called him. He stepped out of his SUV, adjusting his hat against the wind. Morning, Jake. Got word from the state that your property may be tied to an unregistered water system. Thought I'd better be here. Appreciate it, I said. Inspector Garcia shook my hand firmly. Show us the access point. I led them to the shed, opened the hatch, and let them climb in. Voices echoed in the crawl space, sharp, tense, professional. Then the engineer said something that cut through the shed walls like a blade. Oh, this is bad. Garcia followed. This system's not just illegal, it's dangerous. They surfaced 5 minutes later, snow scattering off their suits. Garcia pulled me aside. Mr. Carter, that junction is active. Running water, no permits, no recorded maintenance, no chlorination, 0 testing logs. What happens now? I asked. We need to inspect the source well and the storage tank, she said. Where are they located? In HOA common property, I said. Behind the clubhouse. Garcia and Morales exchanged a look. We'll need access, she said. You won't get it quietly, I warned. We don't need quiet. We need legal authority. We drove in convoy toward the Silver Ridge clubhouse. The moment we pulled in, 3 more state vehicles arrived, health department staff, water quality techs, and a supervisor. They moved with purpose, clipboards and hard cases in hand. 10 minutes later, Bethany's SUV skidded into the lot, nearly clipping a snowbank. She leaped out before the engine even shut off. What do you think you're doing? She shouted, storming toward the inspectors. Garcia didn't flinch. Ma'am, we're conducting an official investigation into an unregistered drinking water system connected to this community. Bethany froze, literally froze, her expression cracking like thin ice. There must be some mistake, she said, voice trembling. We don't have a private system. We already inspected a distribution junction feeding your homes, Garcia said. We now require immediate access to the well and storage tank. Bethany looked at me, then accusation burning behind her panic. You did this, she hissed. No, I said calmly. You did. Sheriff Morales stepped between her and the inspectors. Ma'am, step back. This is state jurisdiction now. This is harassment, she yelled. You can't just barge into HOA property. We can, Garcia said, when public health is at risk. Bethany's eyes darted to the clubhouse, to the inspectors, to the snow, to the road, like she was looking for an escape route and realizing there wasn't one. The storm had broken, but her storm was just beginning. Open the access gate, Garcia ordered. Bethany didn't move. Morales folded his arms. Ma'am. Her hands shook as she reached into her pocket and produced the clubhouse keys. Within minutes, the inspectors descended onto the well site. I watched from a distance as flashlights swept the concrete, as gloved hands removed hatches and valves, as clipboards filled with hurried notes. Then I heard one phrase that carried across the snow like a funeral bell. This system should have been shut down decades ago. And I knew the ground beneath Silver Ridge was about to collapse. Inspector Garcia's voice cut through the frozen air with the weight of a verdict. The other inspectors clustered around the well housing lifting panels, snapping photos, jotting notes. Their movements were fast, practiced, alarmed. I'd seen enough engineering failures in my old dam days to recognize the look. The moment when experts realize a system is not just out of compliance, it's dangerous. Bethany stood rigid in the snow, face pale, arms crossed tight, as if trying to hold the entire HOA together, by force of will alone. I don't understand, she said weakly. We pay for water maintenance every year. We have invoices. Garcia didn't slow her inspection. Invoices don't change the physical condition of equipment. This is a decades-old system operating without permits, certified oversight, or safety redundancies. Anyone drinking this water has been at risk. Sheriff Morales shot Bethany a measured look. You're the HOA president. How did you not know about this? She swallowed hard. These systems were installed before my time. Our records say, Your records are wrong, Garcia snapped. Then turning to the senior engineer beside her, Get a water quality sample and run a preliminary. We need contamination data immediately. Bethany flinched as if the word contamination had physically struck her. I stayed back, watching the uprooting of their secret unfold inch by inch. The HOA board had strutted onto my property days earlier, threatening fines over a heated walkway. Now the same board stood powerless while the state dissected their largest liability in full daylight. Power shift. Clear. Dramatic. Inevitable. After 20 minutes of field testing, the senior engineer returned with a handheld meter. He whispered something to Garcia. Her face hardened. She addressed the sheriff first. We're shutting the system down today, right now. Bethany gasped. You can't. 40 homes rely on that well. And 40 homes have been drinking water from an unmonitored, deteriorating system, Garcia replied. You're lucky we didn't find bacterial markers in the preliminary test. But the risk is severe enough that this system must be decommissioned immediately. What are we supposed to do for water? Bethany demanded. We're arranging temporary emergency hookups, Garcia said. You'll have potable water trucks, then a temporary mains connection. The state will coordinate with the county. Bethany shook her head, trembling. This is going to bankrupt us. Morales looked at her sharply. That's what happens when you run illegal infrastructure. Garcia gestured to me. Mr. Carter, thank you for reporting this. If you hadn't, this could have turned catastrophic. Bethany spun toward me, fury replacing fear. You set this up, didn't you? You've been trying to sabotage the community since the day you moved here. I've lived here 10 years, I said. All I did was turn on a walkway. You're the ones who thought that justified a witch hunt. You had no right to dig into HOA utilities, she snapped. They're not HOA utilities, I said. They're under my land, without permission. The inspectors didn't need to add anything. Her silence confirmed the trespass. The senior engineer cut the primary valve. A dull, metallic clunk echoed across the snow. It was the sound of the HOA losing its last grip on control. Garcia turned to me again. We'll return to your property tomorrow to document the distribution junction. Then to Bethany. You and the board will need to provide every water-related document you've filed in the past 10 years. Consider this a formal directive. Bethany stuttered. We don't keep everything archived. That, Garcia said, is its own violation. The inspectors loaded their equipment and pulled away. County trucks followed, lights strobing against the falling snow. Soon it was just me, Morales, and a shattered HOA president standing in the vacant parking lot. Morales exhaled slowly. Jake, I had no idea they had a system like this running. Not a clue. You weren't supposed to know, I said. None of us were. He rubbed his temple. This will get ugly. The homeowners will panic when they find out. They should panic, I said. They've been drinking water from a ticking time bomb. He didn't argue. When he left, Bethany stayed rooted in place, staring at the well housing as if it had betrayed her. I started walking back toward my truck, but her voice stopped me. This isn't over. I turned. Her expression was twisted anger fighting with humiliation. You think exposing this makes you a hero? She said. The board will not go down because of you. You went down because of you, I said, because you attacked the wrong man and drew attention to the wrong place. Her breath puffed visibly in the cold. I swear, Jake, you'll regret what you've started. I met her stare without blinking. What I started was a phone call and a complaint. What you started was a cover-up. She flinched. Then the last of her composure cracked. She stormed to her SUV, slammed the door, and tore out of the lot, fishtailing snow behind her. When the noise faded, I sat in silence for a moment. The kind that comes after a wall finally breaks. The storm had lifted, leaving a strange clarity across the ridge. The walkway warmed the ground beneath my boots as I stepped onto it again, a thin line of steady heat cutting through the cold world. The HOA had made me their problem. Now the state had made them the problem. But something still gnawed at me. If the well was this illegal, if the line under my barn was this old, what else had they buried? Something told me the worst wasn't the well itself. It was the people connected to it. Marcus, the developer. Patricia, the treasurer. Board members who panicked the second inspectors arrived. The real motive hadn't surfaced yet. But it would. And when it did, the storm the HOA feared most wouldn't be from the sky. It would be from the truth. By the next morning, the emergency trucks were already rolling into Silver Ridge portable tanks, water distribution units, and a small army of state employees moving with a sense of urgency that made one thing clear. This wasn't a minor violation. This was a crisis. One that shouldn't have existed in the first place. I was standing with Inspector Garcia outside my barn when the preliminary contamination report landed on her tablet. She read silently, jaw tightening. What's it say? I asked. She turned the screen toward me. Nitrates are elevated, not critical, but trending. And we found trace bacterial markers, early-stage contamination. If this system kept running, she exhaled sharply. It's a matter of time before someone got sick. I nodded, but my attention drifted to the barn hatch. The pipes beneath it, The forgotten junction with the faded Silver Ridge water distribution stencil weren't the problem. They were just the first loose stone in a collapsing wall. "What else did you find?" I asked. Garcia hesitated. Then she motioned for the senior engineer, Paul, to bring over a small stack of scanned documents. "We subpoenaed the HOA's maintenance and billing records," she said. "You'll want to see this." I flipped through the scans line items labeled Well Maintenance and Quality Services, each bearing the same vendor name, Ridge Source Environmental Solutions. "Never heard of them," I said. "That's because they barely exist," Paul replied. "Shell company, no employees, no physical office, no contractor licenses. They filed a business registration with a P.O. box 2 towns over." Garcia folded her arms. $70,000 paid out over 4 years. No inspections, no tests, no repairs. My stomach tightened. "Who owns it?" Paul pulled up the registration form. Marcus Hale, the developer, Patricia's cousin, the man who'd been advising the HOA for years on property values and infrastructure projects, and the same man who'd quietly acquired parcels around Silver Ridge with suspicious timing. The walkway violation suddenly made even more sense. "Bethany wasn't afraid of the heated walkway," I said. "She was afraid of this being discovered." Garcia nodded grimly. "The walkway confrontation gave you a reason to start looking. The HOA board panicked the second you found that hatch. Their escalation wasn't about compliance, it was about buying time." "Time for what?" "To hide this," Paul answered, lifting the folder. "Or at least bury it deeper." Garcia added, "If the state determines this was intentional fraud or willful negligence, criminal charges are likely." I stared at the snow-covered ridge, imagining the pipes running beneath it like veins feeding a sick organism. Fraud, contamination, siphoned funds, all tucked under the guise of community safety. "What happens next?" I asked. "We continue the investigation," Garcia said. "But the fraud angle, that needs to go to someone with more authority." She meant law enforcement, possibly prosecutors. Before I could reply, a voice carried across the field. "Jake, hey!" I turned. Sarah was trudging through the snow, legal satchel slung over her shoulder. She reached us, breath visible, eyes sharp with purpose. "I just spoke with the assistant state attorney," she said. "They want full documentation from your complaint. Everything. Photos, timestamps, discovery notes." "They think this has legs?" I asked. "They think it has teeth," she corrected. "And they think the HOA board might have known more than they reported." I told her about Ridge Source and the fake invoices. Her expression darkened. "That's embezzlement, clear as day. They used HOA funds under the guise of maintenance fees and funneled the money to a shell company." "Marcus's company," I added. "Exactly." "And Bethany?" I asked. "She signed every approval, every check." The weight of that sentence hung between us. Sarah continued, "Jake, we're not talking about a bad decision or sloppy bookkeeping. We're talking about a criminal conspiracy built on illegal infrastructure." "And a heat walkway complaint triggered the unraveling," I said. She gave a thin smile. "You always did have a talent for picking the right battles." Before I could answer, a cluster of inspectors approached the well housing. One of them waved Garcia over. "We've got a problem," he said. She walked to the small access gate, inspected it, and let out a tense breath. Someone tried to tamper with the data logger. I felt the shift in the air. Deliberate tampering was no accident. It meant the HOA or someone connected to them knew exactly how illegal the system was and was trying to erase evidence. Sarah muttered, "This keeps getting worse for them." Garcia photographed the damage, documenting every angle. "This is obstruction," she said. "Criminal obstruction." From behind us, a new voice spoke. Smooth, confident, too familiar. "You folks shouldn't jump to conclusions." We turned. Marcus Hale stood there, hands in the pockets of a designer winter coat, expression carefully composed as if he were just stopping by to watch the sunset. Sarah stepped forward. "Marcus, interesting timing." "I heard the state was on site," he said. "Wanted to make sure no one overreacted. Old systems break. Nothing unusual about that." "If that's true," Garcia said coldly, "then you'll have no problem producing the maintenance logs your company billed for." His jaw twitched. "Those files may take time to locate." "That's fine," she replied. "We've already issued a formal request. Failure to comply is a felony." The cold silence that followed was sharper than the wind. Marcus shifted his weight. "Look, I'm sure this can be handled without turning it into a circus. Silver Ridge is a respected neighborhood. No need for panic." Sarah crossed her arms. "The only people panicking are the ones with something to hide." He glanced at me next the first time he really acknowledged I was standing there. "This whole thing started over a walkway," he said. "Funny how the smallest problems snowball, isn't it?" "Some problems," I replied, "were buried long before the snow arrived." Marcus's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. Something calculating flickered in them. He turned away, walking back toward the clubhouse. He didn't slip once. People like him didn't slip. They just waited for others to fall. Sarah watched him go. "He's cornered, and he knows it." Garcia added, "When fraud is involved, predators get sloppy." I looked back toward the barn, the ridge, the pipes stretching beneath everything. Bethany had started this war with a walkway, but Marcus was the one who stood to lose the most. And when people like him start losing, they start getting dangerous. Whatever came next would be bigger than fines, meetings, or violations. Silver Ridge wasn't dealing with an HOA problem anymore. It was dealing with a criminal one. By dawn, the state's cease and desist order hit every inbox in the neighborhood. Phones buzzed, group chats erupted, homeowners stepped into the snow-packed streets, staring at the water trucks, the technicians, the yellow tape around the well site. The illusion of a stable, organized HOA shattered in a single morning. I was on my porch, tightening a heat coil junction when the first neighbor approached. Johnson, from 2 doors down. "Jake, is it true?" he asked quietly. "The well, it's illegal? Hazardous?" "Every word," I said. "State inspectors confirmed it." He nodded slowly, grief replacing shock. We trusted them. Across the ridge, more neighbors gathered, clusters of confusion turning into pockets of anger. Conversations got louder, sharper. Someone shouted Bethany's name. Someone else cursed the board. The sheriff's cruiser rolled in next, and Sheriff Morales stepped out, arms folded, surveying the chaos with a practiced calm. "Jake," he said, approaching me, "people are rattled. Emotions are high." "They should be," I replied. "They've been drinking contaminated water." He nodded grimly. "There's going to be a reckoning." Before I could respond, a silver SUV barreled down the road, sliding to a crooked stop in front of my gate. Bethany Crowell got out. She looked like she hadn't slept, hair frazzled, eyes red, lips pressed so tight they were almost white. Patricia and Gary followed behind her, clutching armfuls of folders as if paperwork alone could put the world back together. "You!" Bethany snapped, marching straight at me. "Look what you've done." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "You've destroyed this community," she went on. "You've cost us everything. Our stability, our funding, our credibility." "Our water," I cut in. "You cost the neighborhood their water. You ran an illegal system under my land. You lied to them." "We didn't know," she shouted. But her voice broke. And for the first time, the neighbors behind her didn't look sympathetic. They looked betrayed. Sarah arrived then, stepping between us with all the calm professionalism I'd come to rely on. "Ms. Crowell," she said evenly, "you're here to withdraw the violation against my client, correct?" Bethany blinked. What? Sarah held up the HOA's previous violation notice. This must be rescinded immediately. The state has determined Mr. Carter's property is not under your authority. Your fabricated extended compliance policy will be added to the ongoing investigation. The board members staggered. Patricia opened her mouth to argue but closed it when she saw 20 neighbors watching closely. Bethany exhaled shakily and reached into her folder. She produced a single-page document, unsigned but unmistakably a withdrawal. She thrust it toward me. Here, your walkway is approved, retroactively. The neighbors began murmuring again, this time with irritation, disbelief, growing anger. Approved now? Someone muttered. After threatening him in a blizzard? This is ridiculous, another said. You caused this mess. Bethany stepped back, startled by the rising tide of voices. Sarah raised her voice. Let's be very clear. Withdrawing this violation does not absolve the board of what's happening now. Sheriff Morales added, the state is preparing a criminal referral involving the well system and misuse of HOA funds. That shut everyone up. Patricia dropped a folder into the snow. Papers spilled everywhere. Expense reports, billing statements, correspondence. One page landed face up at my feet. Ridge Source Environmental Solutions, invoice number 1197, $4,800. Description, annual water safety protocol audit, a fake audit. More money funneled out. A homeowner named Lisa stepped forward, shaking with anger. My daughter got sick last fall. We thought it was the flu. You were pumping contaminated water into our house while paying some scam company owned by your cousin, Bethany stammered. We thought the system was fine. Save it, Lisa snapped. You lied. More neighbors closed in, now dozens. Not violent, but righteous, fed up, united. Sarah leaned toward me. Jake, this is the moment the board loses all moral authority. Then let it fall, I said. And it did. The crowd erupted with demands, transparency, resignations, emergency meeting notices. The board tried to speak, but their words evaporated under the weight of the community's fury. Then the final blow landed. Michael Brennan, retired attorney and longtime resident, stepped out from the crowd holding a printed packet. Under Colorado HOA statute, he said, voice steady, 10% of homeowners may call a special meeting to remove the board. I have signatures from 40%. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. Bethany staggered. You can't. We can, Michael said. And we will. A wave of applause rolled over him. Not triumphant, desperate, relieved, angry. Bethany shook her head, eyes darting from neighbor to neighbor, realizing she had no allies left. This is unfair, she whispered. No, Michael replied. This is accountability. The board fled, papers falling from their arms, their SUV fishtailing down the icy road. As the neighbors dispersed, talking urgently, planning, demanding justice, Sarah touched my arm. You just lit the fuse on the HOA's collapse. I looked at the emergency crews finishing temporary water hookups, at the neighbors who had finally found their voice, at the ridge where the secret pipes once carried risk into every home. I didn't light it, I said. They did. But you're the one who handed everyone the match, she said. Behind us, the state workers began sealing the well's control valves, one final metallic clank echoing across Silver Ridge. The sound carried farther than it should have, maybe because everyone heard what it meant. The end of the old HOA had officially begun. But endings don't happen quietly. They crack. They echo. They pull every hidden thing into the light. By the time I reached the community clubhouse that evening, the parking lot was overflowing pickup trucks, sedans, snow-packed SUVs lined shoulder to shoulder. People stood in clusters, some angry, some nervous, all of them waiting for one thing. Answers. The special meeting had been legally triggered, and it was about to become the most consequential night in Silver Ridge history. Inside, the clubhouse felt too small for the crowd it held. Residents lined the walls, chairs filled every aisle, and the low murmur of tension rattled the air like static before a lightning strike. Michael Brennan, retired attorney and the man who'd spearheaded the removal vote, stepped to the front. He didn't need a microphone. The room was silent the moment he raised his hand. "Tonight," he began, "this community exercises its right to hold its HOA board accountable." Bethany sat at the front table with Patricia and Gary. Their faces were tight anger, fear, and exhaustion battling for dominance. Marcus wasn't there. No surprise. Men like him didn't show up for the fallout. They waited in the shadows for opportunities to reassert control. Michael continued, "The state investigation has already uncovered serious violations involving the community well. Tonight is not about criminal charges, that's for prosecutors. Tonight is about governance, responsibility, transparency." He held up a thick binder. "This is Mr. Carter's evidence packet. Photos of the illegal water junction beneath his property, records of the HOA's fabricated compliance policy, invoices issued to RidgeSource Environmental Solutions, owned by developer Marcus Hale, reports showing zero actual maintenance performed despite $70,000 billed." Murmurs surged. People leaned forward. A woman whispered, "I knew something was wrong with the water last year." Bethany shot to her feet. "This is being blown out of proportion," she said sharply. "The system was old, yes, but we trusted our contractors. None of us could have known the company wasn't legitimate." "You signed the checks," Michael replied calmly. Patricia jumped in, voice shaking. "We believed everything was handled properly." "Then you were negligent," a man from the back shouted. "We pay you fees to ensure this community is managed responsibly." Gary slammed a hand on the table. "We did our best." "No," I said, stepping forward. "You did what served your interests. You tried to shut down a safety feature on my property in the middle of a storm. You fabricated rules to pressure me, and all the while you hid the biggest danger this neighborhood has ever faced." All eyes turned to me. Bethany's expression twisted. "Your walkway created a liability." "No," I cut her off. "Your leadership did. If I hadn't discovered that hatch, the contamination could have worsened. Someone could have been hospitalized, or worse." More voices rose. "He's right. My kid got sick last year. What were you doing with our money? Why didn't you disclose the well's condition?" The pressure in the room kept rising. Michael tapped the binder. "I'll now open the floor for resident questions." A dozen hands shot up. He pointed to Lisa Chen. Lisa stepped forward, holding her phone. "I compared the HOA budget from the last 4 years." She tapped the screen, projecting a spreadsheet onto the clubhouse monitor. "Line item, well maintenance. Annual budget, $20,000. Actual expenditures, $19,200 every year, always to RidgeSource. And yet the state found zero maintenance logs. None." She turned to the board. "So, where did the money actually go?" Patricia's face drained of color. It went to RidgeSource. We trusted them." "And who signed the contracts with RidgeSource?" Lisa asked. The room held its breath. Patricia swallowed. "I did." "And who recommended RidgeSource?" Lisa pressed. Silence, then, reluctantly, "Marcus." The crowd exploded. Accusations, outrage, cries for removal. Michael lifted a hand again. "Order. We still need to vote." But the momentum had already shifted. Bethany stood frozen, staring ahead as if she'd finally realized the ground beneath her leadership had collapsed. Michael addressed the room. "All in favor of removing the HOA board for cause mismanagement, negligence, and violation of fiduciary duty? Raise your hand." Hands went up everywhere. Rows, columns, nearly unanimous. Bethany counted desperately, her eyes darting from one side of the room to the other, as if sheer willpower could reverse reality. Against? Michael asked. 3 hands rose, 2 belonging to elderly residents, who probably hadn't processed the full scope of the scandal, and 1 belonging to Gary. The count was uncontestable. By majority vote, Michael declared, the board is removed effective immediately. The room erupted into applause, but that wasn't the final blow. Michael lifted 1 more document. We also moved to turn over the HOA's financial records to a forensic accountant and refer evidence of fraud to the district attorney. The applause transformed, no longer just celebration, but catharsis. Release. Justice. Bethany staggered backward, hitting her chair. You can't do this, she whispered, but she already knew they could. You're making a mistake, she tried again. I held this community together. I protected our standards. Standards? A man shouted. You poisoned us! I met her eyes then. There was no gloating in me, just truth. You didn't protect anything, I said softly. You almost destroyed it. Security escorted her, Patricia, and Gary out of the clubhouse. Not handcuffs yet, but the fear in their eyes said they knew what was coming next. The meeting continued another hour, appointing a temporary board, outlining next steps, preparing for legal coordination with the state. But the real shift had already happened. The HOA wasn't a power above the residents anymore. It belonged to them again. As I stepped outside, the night air hit me with a sense of finality. The ridge was quiet. Snow glittered under the floodlights. Sarah walked beside me. You realize you didn't just win your case, she said. You helped rebuild this entire place. It needed rebuilding, I replied. Still, she said, not many people would have stood up to them. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I watched the old clubhouse still glowing with the energy of a community reclaiming itself. Funny, I said finally. All this started because I wanted to keep one walkway clear. She smiled. Sometimes it takes one warm path to expose a cold truth. We parted ways, and as I drove back to my ranch, I knew something. The fight wasn't over. But the hardest blow had already landed. Tomorrow would bring consequences, and justice was finally catching up. The morning after the vote, the ridge felt different, lighter, like the community had taken its first full breath in years. People waved to one another more. Conversations lingered. Even the emergency water trucks seemed to hum with less tension. I stepped outside to check the heated walkway's control panel, my daily ritual since the blizzard had hit. The coils thrummed beneath the concrete, steady and warm, cutting a clean line through the frost that still clung stubbornly to the rest of Silver Ridge. I hadn't known, when I installed this system months ago, that it would end up exposing the biggest scandal in our community's history. All I'd wanted was to keep Mrs. Halverson from slipping in winter. But sometimes small acts shine the brightest light. At 8:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. A new email from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Subject: Commendation. Jake Carter. I opened it. A formal letter unfolded across the screen. Words like public health contribution, early detection, and community safety jumped out. They thanked me for reporting the illegal well before contamination levels became dangerous. I read it twice before setting the phone down. A year ago, I avoided HOA meetings. I kept to myself. I built things, fixed things, stayed on my land and let others run theirs. Never imagined I'd end up at the center of a political storm. Now here I was, holding a commendation from the state. Before I could dwell on it, a familiar knock rattled the front door. I opened it to find Mrs. Halverson bundled in a purple coat, cheeks red from the cold, holding a loaf of banana bread. I figured you could use something warm, she said. You've been fighting for all of us. I smiled. I did what anyone should have done. Oh, don't give me that modest engineer talk, she said, waving a hand. You stood up when everyone else was afraid. That walkway of yours might have saved us in more ways than one. Her gratitude meant more than the state letter. Thank you, I said, taking the bread. And, she added as she adjusted her scarf, I heard the district attorney is moving quickly with charges. My niece works at the courthouse. I raised an eyebrow. Already? They're not playing around, she said. The well, the shell company, the missing money. Bethany and her little circle dug a hole too deep to climb out of. After she left, I took a walk down the ridge. Not far, just enough to see who else was out. Several neighbors were clearing their driveways. A few were talking beside the water truck. Someone waved me over. Jake, you here? It was Tom, the guy whose truck had sparked one of Bethany's petty crusades months earlier. District attorney just issued warrants, he said. Sheriff Morales served them an hour ago. My chest tightened with a mix of disbelief and vindication. For who? I asked. Bethany, Patricia, and Marcus, fraud, embezzlement, operating unlawful water infrastructure, endangerment, you name it. Another neighbor chimed in. Gary got immunity, rolled on all of them. I exhaled. Not because I felt bad, not even close, but because this confirmed what the entire community needed. Justice wasn't just rumored. It was real. By noon, the local news vans arrived. They clustered outside the clubhouse, reporting live. A headline blared on someone's phone screen. Former HOA president arrested in illegal water scandal. It felt surreal, not triumphant, just necessary. A few hours later, Sarah swung by in her Jeep. Jake, she said as she stepped out, I thought you'd want to know your case forced the HOA's insurance carrier to intervene. In a good way? The best way. They're covering most of the emergency water hookup costs. Homeowners won't foot the bill for the board's fraud. Relief washed through me. These families had already been through enough. And, she added, handing me a sealed envelope, the temporary board voted last night to restore your walkway approval permanently. Full recognition as a community safety asset. They also asked me to give you this. I opened the envelope. Inside was a simple thank you card signed by dozens of neighbors. Some messages were short. You protected all of us. Thank you for standing up when we couldn't. My kids are safer because of you. We won't forget what you did. I swallowed hard. Sarah gave me a small smile. You changed this place. Not alone, I said. Maybe not, she replied. But no one else took the first step. As the evening settled in, I made one last walk to the edge of my property. Snow drifted off the ridge, glowing faintly under the walkway lights. The neighborhood was quieter than usual, not silent, but peaceful. A kind of peace that comes after a storm has finally done its damage and moved on. I stood there a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The walkway, the violation, the pipes, the confrontation, the collapse of the old HOA, the rebuilding of something healthier, better. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was a heated walkway in a blizzard. Sometimes it was a community taking back its voice. Sometimes it was plain persistence against people who counted on fear to keep them in power. The walkway hummed beneath my boots, a reminder that one small act of resistance can expose everything built on lies. I headed back inside as the first snowflakes of the next storm drifted down. But this time, the storm didn't bother me. Silver Ridge had weathered something far worse and come out stronger. Tomorrow would bring new meetings, new planning, new leadership. A community rebuilding instead of tearing itself apart. But tonight? Tonight belonged to quiet victory. The walkway glowed softly behind me, cutting a warm path through the cold world. Not just a tool, not just an upgrade, a symbol of dignity, of accountability, of one man refusing to bow. And as long as it burned beneath the snow, I knew this place, my place, would never fall under tyranny again. If you've ever stood your ground against an HOA or anyone who overstepped, drop a simple justice in the comments. And if you believe folks should protect what's theirs and never back down from the truth, go ahead and hit subscribe. I've got more stories coming your way. Here's to dignity, courage, and keeping the land free.